Let's go Ravens! A lot of things are happening, and the Baltimore Ravens need to make some important decisions from now on. We're talking about big roster changes, surprise retirements, salary cap changes, and draft capital that could change everything for John Harbaugh's team. I'll tell you all the details about these updates, but first, make sure you've already hit the like button, but only do so if you believe that Lamar Jackson will help us get to the next Super Bowl. Man, I still believe in him so much. Despite his age, he's still a great player, and yes, he'll definitely help us get to the Super Bowl. If possible, comment like this: Go Ravens! Go Lamar Jackson! We'll talk more about him in a bit, but I want to start this news by talking about this bombshell. Michael Pierce, the big man in the middle of the Ravens defense, is officially retiring. Now, for those of you who have been following along closely, you may have had a feeling this was coming. Remember a few months ago when players were crowding around your locker, signing your helmet? There was speculation, but nothing official. Even Marlon Humphrey tried to downplay it, saying people were reading too much into it. Well, now we know, the speculation was real. Pierce is stepping away from the game, and it's a huge loss for the Ravens' defensive line. Not just because of his size, although, let's be real, the guy was a force in the trenches, but because of the impact he had on this defense. He was a difference maker, pure and simple. Injuries have been a problem, but when he was on the field, you knew it. Now the Ravens are left with a gap in their interior defensive line. Travis Jones, Broderick Washington, and Justin Matabike are still there, but that's a big hole to fill. And the timing? Right before free agency officially kicks off? That throws a wrench in everything. The front office now has to decide how they handle this, not just from a roster standpoint, but from a financial one. Speaking of money, let's talk cap implications. According to Ravens salary cap expert Brian McFarland, if the team processes Pierce's retirement before June 1st, they free up about $666,000 in cap space while carrying about $2 million in dead money. But if they wait until after June 1st, that cap savings jumps to $2 million for 2025. It's a decision that could impact how aggressive they are in free agency right now. Do they take the small cap boost this year or wait for the bigger payout next year? This is the kind of front office chess game that Eric DeCosta and his team are constantly playing. And speaking of roster moves, the Ravens are officially releasing safety Marcus Williams. This is a name we've heard a lot, but it's now happening. Expect that announcement any moment now, likely around 4 p.m. Eastern. And he's not the only one. Cornerback Arthur Maulet is also out, though that one might have slipped under the radar for some. He missed most of the season due to injury, and with the Ravens needing to free up space, the move makes sense. Could he return later? Possibly. He didn't leave on bad terms, so if the team finds themselves needing depth later in camp, a reunion isn't off the table. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Post-June 1st designations. If you're not familiar with this, teams are allowed to release 2 players before June 1st and spread their cap hits over multiple years. This is huge because, according to McFarland, the Ravens might use this on Williams and, get ready, Justin Tucker. Now, before anyone panics, nothing is confirmed with Tucker yet. It's a possibility being floated, but if it does happen, it's a sign of just how much the Ravens are trying to manipulate the cap this offseason. And then there's the draft. Oh boy, the Ravens are stacking up picks again. If you know this team, you know they love their draft capital, and they just picked up 4 compensatory picks for losing Patrick Queen, J.V. Clowney, Geno Stone, and Kevin Zeitler. That brings their total to 11 draft picks this year. And if you think they're not going to use them all, well, history says otherwise. Remember a few years ago when they had 11 picks? People said, no way they used them all. What did they do? They used every single one. Some turned into starters, some added depth, and some didn't even make the team. But that's the draft. It's a gamble, and the Ravens are playing with a stacked deck. To break it down, they've got 1 pick in the first round, 1 in the second, 1 in the third, 2 in the fourth, 1 in the fifth, 4 in the sixth, and 1 in the 7th. That's a lot of ammo. And with DeCosta calling the shots, don't be surprised if some of these picks get moved around to either trade up or bring in veteran help. Oh, and let's not forget the bonus money rolling in. 2 Ravens players, Daniel Falale and Darius Washington, just got nice pay bumps thanks to the NFL's performance-based pay system. Falale, who stepped up in a major way, is pocketing an extra $1 million, while Washington gets a solid $876,000. Not a bad payday, right? So there you have it. The Ravens are making moves, some expected, some surprising, but every single one of them has consequences for how this team is going to shape up next season. And now the question is, what do you think? How should the Ravens handle Pierce's retirement? Do you think they'll actually use all 11 draft picks? And what about the possibility of a post-June 1st release for someone like Justin Tucker? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and be sure to stay locked in because with the Ravens, you never know what's coming next. And here's where things get even more unpredictable. Because if you think the Ravens are done making moves, think again. This front office is known for playing the long game, and every single decision they're making right now is setting up what could be one of the most pivotal off-seasons in recent memory. Let's go back to Michael Pierce for a second. His retirement doesn't just impact the defensive line, it creates a ripple effect across the entire roster. The Ravens' run defense was one of the best in the league last season, and a big reason for that was having Pierce as the anchor in the middle. Losing him means there's suddenly a major question mark about who steps up. Is Travis Jones ready to take on a bigger role? Can Broderick Washington and Justin Matabike handle even more snaps? Or, and this is something that cannot be ruled out, does this force the Ravens to hit free agency and look for a veteran defensive tackle? The answer to that could depend on what they do with their cap space in the coming weeks. Because let's be real, this team is tight on money. The Ravens always operate with a calculated approach when it comes to the salary cap, but right now, they have to make some tough choices. That's why Marcus Williams' release was so expected, and it's why Justin Tucker's name being floated as a post-June 1st designation is so wild. Tucker is a franchise icon, one of the best kickers in NFL history, and still a difference maker in close games. Cutting him would be a shocking move, but from a financial perspective, it could make sense if the Ravens believe they need that money elsewhere. Again, nothing is official, but this is the kind of stuff that happens in the offseason that fans don't always see coming. And let's not overlook Arthur Maulet's release. It might not seem like a big deal on the surface, but that's another depth piece gone in the secondary. And when you combine that with Marcus Williams leaving, suddenly, the Ravens' defensive backfield has some holes. Kyle Hamilton is still there, obviously, but does this mean the Ravens are preparing to draft another safety? Or do they believe in some of their younger guys to step up? Maybe they bring in a cheaper veteran option, but again, it all comes down to money. Speaking of the draft, we have to talk about those 11 picks again. Because if you've been following the Ravens long enough, you know this. Eric DeCosta loves having options. And having 11 picks gives them a ton of flexibility. Do they package some of them to move up and get a top-tier prospect? Do they trade back and stockpile more picks for future years? Or do they actually go ahead and use all of them like they did before? The Ravens' draft strategy is always fascinating because they don't just draft for need, they draft for long-term success. That's why we've seen them take players in past drafts who might not have an immediate role but end up being key contributors down the line. And here's where it gets even more fun, because the Ravens aren't just thinking about the draft. They're also keeping an eye on the rest of free agency. And now, with some cap space opening up from these recent moves, the question becomes, who do they target? Are they looking at another edge rusher? Do they go after a veteran cornerback? Is there a wide receiver out there that fits what they need? So now, it's your turn. What do you think is the next move? Should the Ravens go after a veteran defensive tackle to replace Pierce? Do they need to bring in more help at safety with Marcus Williams gone? And what about the draft? Should they trade up, trade down, or use all 11 picks? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to stay tuned because with this team, you never know what's coming next.